The Mafia boss had one rule: no families in his mansion. But when the maid's baby signed a word only his inner circle knew, everything changed. Now, he'd burn his empire to the ground before letting anyone touch them. The chandelier cast long shadows across the mahogany table. 22 empty chairs. One occupied. Leonardo Russo cut his steak with surgical precision, the knife gliding through meat without a sound he could hear. The silence didn't bother him anymore. It had been his companion for 8 years, ever since the car bomb that should have killed him only stole half of who he was. He chewed slowly, eyes scanning the dining hall with the same methodical attention he gave to everything. The ornate mirror on the far wall. The slight tremor in the curtain from the heating vent. The way the wine caught the light at exactly 7:47 p.m., same as every night. Control. Routine. Predictability. These were the pillars that kept a deaf man alive in a world built on whispered threats and midnight phone calls. His phone buzzed against the table. A text from his head of security. All clear. Perimeters secure. Leonardo set down his fork and reached for his wine when movement in his peripheral vision made him pause. The service door had opened. He turned his head sharply. Sophia, the new maid, stood frozen in the doorway, her face pale. She was late. Dinner service ended at 7:30. It was now 7:48. But that wasn't what held Leonardo's attention. In her arms, wrapped in a faded yellow blanket, was a baby. Leonardo's jaw tightened. His rules were absolute. No exceptions. No families. No children in the mansion. The staff knew this. They all knew this. Sophia's mouth was moving, apologies probably. Explanations. Leonardo didn't bother trying to read her lips. He raised one hand, palm flat, fingers together. The sign was clear. Stop. She stopped. He pointed at her, then at the door. Leave. Sophia's eyes glistened. She nodded quickly, turning to go, but the baby shifted in her arms. The blanket fell slightly, revealing a round face and curious dark eyes. Eyes that locked directly onto Leonardo. He stared back, expression cold. He'd perfected that stare, the one that made grown men confess their betrayals before he even asked the question. The baby blinked. Then she smiled, and clapped once. Leonardo's hand, reaching for his wine glass, stopped midair. The baby's tiny hand moved. Deliberately. Purposefully. Her palm pressed flat against her chest, then moved outward in a small, clear motion. Safe. The exact sign Leonardo used with his inner circle. The silent signal that meant a location was secure, a person was trusted, a threat had been neutralized. The wine glass slipped from his fingers. It shattered against the marble floor, red liquid spreading like blood across white stone. Leonardo didn't notice. He was standing now, his chair scraping back, his eyes locked on the child. Sophia was crying, backing away, pulling her daughter close. Her mouth formed frantic words Leonardo couldn't hear and didn't care about. The baby reached out one small hand toward him and signed it again. Safe. Leonardo's heart, a muscle he'd forgotten could race, pounded against his ribs. In 8 years of silence, in a decade of building an empire on fear and precision, no one had ever surprised him. No one. His mind worked rapidly, analyzing possibilities. Coincidence. It had to be coincidence. A random gesture that happened to match. But the baby's eyes never left his. There was recognition there. Not of him, perhaps, but of something. The movement had been too deliberate. Too exact. Leonardo moved around the table, his footsteps heavy, but silent to his own ears. Sophia scrambled backward until her back hit the wall. She was clutching her daughter, so tightly, the baby squirmed. He stopped 3 feet away. Close enough to see the baby clearly. Far enough to not be threatening, though his presence alone was threat enough. The child couldn't be more than 10 months old. Too young to speak. Too young to understand complex gestures. Too young to have learned sign language. Too young to know what that sign meant in Leonardo's world. He raised his hand slowly, deliberately and formed the sign again.
Safe.
The baby's face lit up. She clapped twice, bouncing in her mother's arms, and repeated the gesture. Safe. Then she did something that made Leonardo's blood run cold. She formed another sign, one he'd created himself, one that existed nowhere in standard sign language textbooks. A gesture his own men had learned through years of working under him. Her tiny fist moved to her temple, then twisted slightly.
Protect.
The room tilted. Leonardo's hand shot out, gripping the edge of the table to steady himself. His tactical mind, the one that had kept him alive through 3 assassination attempts and 2 family wars, was screaming alerts. This wasn't possible. Sophia was sobbing now, sinking to the floor, still holding her daughter. Leonardo couldn't hear her cries, but he could see her body shaking. She thought he would kill them. Maybe he should. In his world, unexplained phenomena meant danger. Unknowns meant vulnerabilities. And Leonardo Russo eliminated vulnerabilities. But his hand moved to his phone instead. He typed rapidly. Security to dining hall.
Now.
Bring recording equipment. The baby reached toward him again, undeterred by her mother's fear or Leonardo's stone-cold expression. She made a soft sound. He could see her lips form it, could see the breath, and signed once more.
Safe. Protect.
Leonardo looked down at this impossible child who spoke his language. A language she couldn't possibly know. A language he'd built in silence to survive in a world of sound. For the first time in 8 years, Leonardo Russo felt something other than control. He felt terrified. Because in his experience, when something impossible happened, it was never an accident. It was always a message. A warning. A weapon. The question was, whose weapon was she? And why had she chosen to reveal herself to him? Leonardo's men arrived in 47 seconds. He'd counted each one. Marco, his head of security, entered first, gun drawn, eyes sweeping the room. Behind him, 2 more guards flanked the doorway. They took in the scene, their boss standing rigid by the table. A maid collapsed against the wall with a baby, shattered glass and wine spreading across the floor. Marco's hand moved in rapid signs. Threat? Orders? Leonardo's response was equally swift.
No harm.
Record, everything. Marco's eyebrows rose, the only sign of his surprise, but he obeyed without hesitation. He holstered his weapon and gestured to the guard behind him, who produced a small camera. Sophia watched with wide, terrified eyes as the guard began filming. She tried to make herself smaller, curling around her daughter protectively. Leonardo moved to his phone and typed a longer message, then turned the screen toward Marco. Install surveillance in servants' quarters. All footage to my private server. No one else views it. Track all movements, interactions.
I want to know everything about this child.
Marco read it twice, his frown deepening. He signed back. The maid too. Especially the maid. She's done something. Leonardo's jaw clenched. How could he explain what he'd seen? That a baby had communicated with him using signs that shouldn't exist outside his inner circle? That she'd looked at him with recognition, not fear? He couldn't. Not yet. Not until he understood it himself.
Just do it, he signed.
Quietly. Marco nodded, but Leonardo caught the concern in his eyes. In 10 years of service, Marco had never questioned an order. But he was questioning this one, silently, carefully. Leonardo turned his attention back to Sophia. She was trembling so violently her daughter had begun to fuss, sensing her mother's distress. He crouched slowly, keeping his distance, and pulled out his phone. He typed, "What is your daughter's name?" Sophia stared at the screen, then at him, her mouth opening and closing. Finally, she managed to speak. Leonardo couldn't hear her words, but he watched her lips carefully. Isabella, she was saying. Her name is Isabella. Leonardo typed again. Has she been trained in sign language? Sophia shook her head frantically, her lips forming clear words. No. Never. She's too young. She watches things. She copies. Copies what? Everything. Movements. Gestures. Sophia's hands moved as she spoke, demonstrating. But I don't know sign language. I can't teach her what I don't know. Leonardo stared at the baby, Isabella. She'd calmed now, her attention fixed on him with unsettling focus. When he didn't move, she lifted her hand again.
Safe.
The sign was perfect. The placement, the movement, the meaning all exact. He typed, "Where did you work before here?" "Nowhere like this." Sophia's voice was barely above a whisper, but Leonardo read her lips clearly. "I cleaned offices downtown. Small places. I needed this job. Please, I'll leave tonight. Just don't hurt her." Leonardo's eyes narrowed. If Sophia was lying, she was exceptional at it. Her fear was genuine. He'd seen enough fake terror to know the difference. She had no idea why her daughter could do what she was doing, which meant either the child was naturally gifted, impossibly so, or someone had gotten to her without the mother's knowledge. Both options were unacceptable. He stood and gestured to Marco. His hands moved in sharp, decisive signs, separate surveillance on the baby. Medical evaluation tomorrow. Discreet. Use Dr. Chen. Tell him nothing except I need a full neurological workup. On an infant? Marco signed back, his confusion evident.
Yes. Why?
Leonardo's hands stilled. Then, slowly, he signed something he never thought he'd communicate. She understands me. Marco's expression remained neutral, but Leonardo saw the disbelief flicker across his features. To his credit, he didn't argue. He simply nodded. Leonardo typed one more message and showed it to Sophia. "You and your daughter will remain on the estate tonight. You are not in danger, but you will not leave until I give permission. Do you understand?" Sophia nodded, clutching Isabella tighter. Leonardo straightened and gestured toward the door. One of the guards moved to help Sophia to her feet, but she flinched away. She stood on her own, legs shaking, and carried her daughter toward the exit. Isabella looked back over her mother's shoulder. Her eyes met Leonardo's. And she signed one more word, another one of his private signs, one he used only with Marco when situations turned critical.
Watch.
Not watching or I'm watching, but watch. As in be careful. Stay alert. It was a warning. Leonardo's hand moved to his chest, pressing against the place where his heart hammered. Isabella smiled, as if satisfied, then nestled against her mother's shoulder. They disappeared through the doorway. The dining hall fell silent, or perhaps it had always been silent, and Leonardo was only now noticing the weight of it. Marco approached, signing. What did she do? Leonardo looked at his most trusted man, the one who'd saved his life twice and never asked for anything in return. He signed back. She told me to be careful. Marco's face paled, because they both knew what that meant. Somehow, impossibly, a 10-month-old baby had just demonstrated tactical awareness. She hadn't just mimicked signs. She'd used them contextually. Appropriately. She'd communicated. Leonardo walked to the window, looking out at the dark grounds of his estate. Somewhere in the servants' quarters, that child was being put to bed. And tomorrow, he would begin finding answers. But tonight, for the first time in 8 years, Leonardo Russo would not sleep. Because the most dangerous weapon wasn't a gun or a bomb. It was the one you never saw coming. Sophia didn't sleep. She sat on the narrow bed in her assigned room, Isabella finally asleep in her arms, and watched the door. Every shadow that passed in the hallway made her heart jump. Every distant sound, footsteps, doors closing, the old building settling, convinced her they were coming. She'd heard the stories. Everyone had. Leonardo Russo didn't forgive mistakes. He didn't show mercy. Men who crossed him disappeared. Families who betrayed him were erased. And she, stupid, desperate, foolish, had brought her daughter into his private space. Into his world. Sophia looked down at Isabella's peaceful face, tears sliding silently down her cheeks. How could she have been so careless? The regular babysitter had canceled last minute, and Sophia couldn't afford to miss a shift. Not with rent overdue and formula costs climbing. She'd thought she could sneak Isabella into the kitchen, keep her quiet, finish the work quickly. She'd thought wrong. But what terrified Sophia most wasn't that she'd broken the rules. It was what had happened after. Isabella's hands. Those gestures. Sophia had seen Mr. Russo's face change, watched the color drain from it, watched his carefully controlled expression crack. She'd seen fear in his eyes. And if Leonardo Russo was afraid of her daughter, then Isabella was in more danger than Sophia could comprehend. A soft knock made Sophia gasp. She clutched Isabella tighter, backing against the headboard. The door opened slowly. A woman entered, older, gray hair pulled back severely, wearing a housekeeper's uniform. Sophia recognized her as Mrs. Chun, the head of household staff. Mrs. Chen's expression was unreadable. She closed the door behind her and approached with measured steps. "You've made things complicated," she said quietly, her voice carrying the weight of experience. "For yourself and your child."
I'm sorry, Sophia whispered.
"I'll leave. Tonight."
Right now.
"Just please." "You can't leave." Mrs. Chen sat in the room's only chair, her movements deliberate. "Mr. Russo's orders. You stay until he says otherwise." Sophia's stomach dropped. "He's going to." "I don't know what he's going to do." Mrs. Chen folded her hands in her lap. "In 15 years of working for him, I've never seen him react like that." "He didn't hurt you."
"That's
unusual." "My daughter." Sophia's voice broke. She didn't mean anything by those hand movements. She's just a baby. She copies things she sees on television from people in the park. She's never seen Mr. Russo before tonight. Never. Mrs. Chen's eyes narrowed thoughtfully. "And you don't know sign language?"
No.
"Nothing. A few basic words maybe, from a video I watched once." But Sophia stopped, realization dawning. Those weren't normal signs, were they? Mrs. Chen didn't answer directly. "Mr. Russo is deaf. He has been for 8 years. He communicates through sign language with his close circle. Very specific signs. Not standard ASL." Sophia felt cold. "What does that mean?" "It means," Mrs. Chen said carefully, "that your daughter did something impossible. And Mr. Russo doesn't believe in impossibilities. He believes in threats. She's 10 months old." "I know." Mrs. Chen's expression softened slightly. "Which is why you're still alive. He's trying to understand before he acts. That's the only reason you have time." "Time for what?" "To figure out how your daughter knows things she shouldn't. To convince him she's not a weapon someone planted." Mrs. Chen leaned forward. "Because that's what he thinks, Sophia. He thinks someone trained your baby to infiltrate his home." Sophia's laugh came out broken, hysterical. "That's insane. She's a baby. She can barely walk. She can't even talk yet. How would anyone?" "I'm telling you what he's thinking. Not what's rational." Mrs. Chen stood. "There will be a doctor tomorrow. Let him examine Isabella.
Don't resist.
Don't run. And for God's sake, don't let her make those hand gestures again. I can't control what she does. She's 10 months old." Mrs. Chen moved to the door, then paused. "I had a daughter once. Long time ago. Different life." Her voice softened with memory. "The things we do to protect them. There's no limit, is there?" Sophia nodded, unable to speak. "Then protect her by cooperating. Mr. Russo is dangerous, but he's not cruel without reason. If he finds no threat, he may let you go." Mrs. Chen's hand rested on the doorknob. "But Sophia? Don't lie to him. About anything. He'll know." The door closed softly. Sophia sat in the darkness, holding her sleeping daughter. Through the thin walls, she could hear muffled sounds, other staff members settling in for the night, water running through old pipes, the distant hum of security systems. And something else. A faint electronic whir. Sophia's eyes adjusted to the darkness, scanning the room. There, in the corner near the ceiling, a tiny red light, barely visible.
A camera.
They were watching.
Right now.
Watching her hold her daughter. Watching Isabella sleep. Sophia's arms tightened protectively around her baby. Isabella stirred but didn't wake, her tiny hand curling against Sophia's chest. Against her heart. In the morning, men would come. A doctor would examine her daughter, searching for explanations Sophia couldn't provide. And somewhere in this massive, silent house, Leonardo Russo would be watching every moment, looking for proof that they were dangerous. But the only danger here was him. And Sophia had nowhere to run. Isabella's hand moved in her sleep, a small gesture, innocent and unconscious. It looked exactly like that sign. The one that had started everything. Safe. Sophia closed her eyes and prayed her daughter was right. Leonardo hadn't blinked in 3 minutes. The footage played on loop, the same 10 seconds, frame by frame, angle by angle. His private office was dark except for the glow of multiple screens, each displaying different camera perspectives of the dining hall from the night before.
3:47 a.m.
He'd been watching for 8 hours. Isabella's hand rising. The deliberate press against her chest. The outward motion. Perfect form. Perfect execution. Safe. Leonardo tapped a key. The footage reversed, played again. He zoomed in on the baby's face. Her eyes. There, that flicker of focus before she moved. That wasn't random. That was intention. He switched to the servants' quarters feed. Sophia was asleep now, finally, her daughter curled against her. The camera's night vision painted them in shades of gray and green. Peaceful. Innocent. Leonardo's jaw clenched. Nothing was innocent in his world. His phone vibrated. A text from Marco. Dr. Chen arrived. Waiting in exam room. Leonardo stood, his body stiff from hours of immobility. He grabbed his suit jacket and left the office, his footsteps silent on marble floors. The medical suite was in the East Wing, originally designed for emergencies, now used for discreet evaluations. Dr. Peter Chen stood by the window, a thin man in his 60s with careful eyes. He was one of 3 doctors Leonardo trusted, primarily because Leonardo knew every secret the man wanted hidden. Dr. Chen turned when Leonardo entered. He signed a greeting, "Good morning." Leonardo's response was curt, "The child. What can you tell me? I haven't examined her yet." Your man said minimal explanation. Just a neurological workup on an infant. Dr. Chen's hands moved with practiced fluency. He'd learned sign language years ago when Leonardo had first recruited him. That's unusual. What am I looking for? Leonardo pulled out his phone and showed him the footage. Dr. Chen watched, his expression shifting from confusion to fascination. May I see that again? Leonardo replayed it. That's ASL, Dr. Chen said slowly, his hands signing as he spoke. Modified, but clearly intentional. How old? 10 months.
Impossible.
The motor control alone. Infants that age barely have the dexterity for precise hand gestures. The cognitive understanding of symbolic communication doesn't develop until at least 12 to 15 months. Usually later, Dr. Chen looked up from the screen. This child is advanced. Remarkably so. Or trained. At 10 months. Dr. Chen shook his head. You can't train muscle memory and symbolic reasoning into an infant that young. The neurological pathways haven't developed. Then explain what I saw. Dr. Chen watched the footage a 3rd time. There are documented cases of exceptional development. Outliers. Children who walk at 7 months, speak in sentences at 18 months.
But this, he paused.
This suggests something else. What? Pattern recognition. Not mimicry. Actual recognition. Dr. Chen's hands moved thoughtfully as he signed. Some children, particularly those exposed to complex visual stimuli early, develop enhanced ability to read and replicate physical patterns. It's instinctive, not learned. Leonardo's eyes narrowed. She's never seen me before last night. Doesn't matter. If she has this ability, she could observe, process, and replicate in real time. Like a mirror, but with understanding. Dr. Chen set down the phone. I need to examine her properly. Neurological tests, developmental assessment, maybe an EEG if you'll permit it. Do it. But Leonardo, if I'm right about this, if she's naturally hypersensitive to visual communication, she's not a threat. She's a phenomenon. Leonardo's expression remained stone. Find out which one. 2 hours later, Leonardo stood behind one-way glass, watching Dr. Chen examine Isabella in the adjacent room. Sophia sat nearby, her hands twisted together nervously. Isabella was on an examination table, surprisingly calm despite the strange surroundings and stranger prodding at her. Dr. Chen performed standard tests first: reflexes, motor responses, visual tracking. Isabella cooperated, her dark eyes following his movements with intense focus. Then Dr. Chen did something Leonardo hadn't anticipated. He signed to Isabella, "Hello." Isabella blinked. Her hand rose slowly. "Hello." Perfect replication. Same gesture, same timing. Sophia gasped. I've never taught her." Dr. Chen held up a hand for silence. He signed again, happy. Isabella stared at his hands. Her tiny face scrunched in concentration. Then her hand moved, attempting the gesture. It was clumsy, incomplete, but recognizable. Dr. Chen signed faster now, running through a series of basic signs.
Eat. Sleep.
Mother. Baby. Isabella replicated each one with increasing accuracy. Not perfect, her motor control couldn't match the complexity, but the intent was clear. She was learning in real time. Leonardo's hands pressed flat against the glass. Dr. Chen pulled out his phone and showed Sophia a video, some children's show, with exaggerated gestures and movements. Isabella barely glanced at it. Then he turned the phone toward himself and signed, "Watch me." Isabella's attention snapped back immediately. Her entire focus locked onto his hands. Dr. Chen signed a random sequence, meaningless gestures, made-up signs. Isabella watched intently, but didn't replicate them. Instead, she looked confused, frustrated. She knew they meant nothing. Dr. Chen's expression shifted. He looked toward the one-way glass, directly at where Leonardo stood, and signed. She doesn't just copy. She comprehends. She knows when gestures carry meaning and when they're empty. Leonardo felt something cold settle in his chest. Dr. Chen signed to Isabella again. "Where is safe?" Isabella's hand moved immediately. She pointed at the one-way glass. At Leonardo. Then she signed, "Safe." Sophia's face went white. How does she know he's there? She can't see through that glass. Dr. Chen stood slowly, his professional composure cracking. He signed toward Leonardo. "We need to talk."
Now.
In Leonardo's office, Dr. Chen's hands moved rapidly. That child has the most advanced visual processing ability I've ever documented. She's not just reading gestures, she's reading intent, emotion, spatial awareness. She knew you were behind that glass because she felt your presence. That's not possible. It shouldn't be. But I tested her hearing, completely normal.
No impairment.
Yet she's developed what I can only describe as compensatory hypersensitivity. As if she's deaf without being deaf. Leonardo went still. "Explain." "Some children born to deaf parents develop this. Enhanced visual attention, heightened sensitivity to nonverbal cues. But this is exponentially more developed." Dr. Chen paused. "Leonardo, has this child been around you before? Even briefly?"
No.
Then there's only one explanation. Dr. Chen's hands moved slowly, deliberately. She's naturally attuned to you specifically. To your communication style. Your patterns. It's as if she was born understanding your language. The words hung in the air between them. Leonardo turned away, looking out at his estate grounds. Dawn was breaking, painting everything in shades of gold and shadow. A child who understood him, without training. Without exposure. Without reason. In his world. That wasn't a miracle. It was a warning. And Leonardo never ignored warnings. Night fell again, and Leonardo broke his own rule. He ordered Sophia and Isabella back to the dining hall. Marco's hands moved in sharp protest. "Too dangerous. You don't know what this means yet." Leonardo's response was firm. "I need to see it again. Under controlled conditions. You're exposing yourself." "I'm already exposed." Leonardo's jaw tightened. "If she's a weapon, she's already armed. If she's not, I need to know." Marco didn't argue further, but his disapproval was evident in every rigid line of his posture as he left to retrieve them. Leonardo stood at the head of the table, the same position as the night before. But this time, he'd removed all the place settings except two. One for him. One smaller chair, a child's seat borrowed from somewhere in the mansion, positioned 3 feet to his right. The door opened. Sophia entered, holding Isabella, her eyes wide with fear. 2 guards flanked her, not threatening, but present. Marco brought up the rear, his hand resting casually near his concealed weapon. Leonardo gestured to the small chair. Sophia hesitated, then carefully set Isabella down in it. The baby wobbled, gripping the edge of the table for balance, her legs dangling. Sophia moved to step back, but Leonardo raised his hand.
Stay.
She froze. Leonardo sat slowly, deliberately, keeping his movements visible and controlled. Isabella watched him with those unnervingly focused eyes. For a long moment, no one moved. Then Leonardo placed his right hand flat on the table.
Palm down. Fingers spread.
It was a test, a sign that existed only in his private vocabulary. Among his men, it meant, show yourself. Declare your position. Isabella looked at his hand, then at his face, then back at his hand. Her tiny palm pressed flat against the table, mirroring his exactly. Sophia made a choked sound. Marco's hand moved fractionally toward his weapon. Leonardo's heart hammered, but his expression remained neutral. He lifted his hand and formed another sign. Who? Isabella tilted her head, studying him. Her hand moved, not in response, but in initiation. She signed something new. Alone. Leonardo's breath caught. That sign. He'd created it 5 years ago, after the second assassination attempt. It meant isolated, vulnerable, exposed. His men used it to indicate when someone was operating without backup. How could she possibly? Isabella wasn't finished. Her hand moved again, this time touching her chest, then reaching toward him. Alone. Together. The words, if they could be called words, hit Leonardo like a physical blow. Alone together. Isolated together. 2 people who existed in silence. She was describing them both. Mr. Russo? Sophia's voice trembled. Please, I don't understand what's happening. What is she doing? Leonardo couldn't answer. Couldn't look away from Isabella's dark eyes. The baby wasn't just communicating, she was connecting, recognizing something in him that she shared. His hands moved almost against his will. You see me? Isabella's face lit up. She clapped once, pure joy, and signed back, see.
See. See.
Then she did something that made the room tilt. She reached out and took Leonardo's hand. Her tiny fingers wrapped around his index finger, and she pulled gently, trying to draw his hand closer. When he didn't resist, she pressed his palm flat against the table again, then placed her hand directly on top of his. Her touch was warm, trusting. She signed with her free hand, safe. Leonardo stared at their joined hands, his scarred and weapon-worn, her soft and impossibly small. In 8 years of building an empire through fear and control, no one had touched him without purpose. Every handshake was calculated. Every contact was tactical. This was neither. This was a child seeking comfort from someone she recognized as kin. Sir, Marco's voice cut through the moment, sharp with urgency. He was signing rapidly. This is wrong. Something's wrong. No child behaves like this. Leonardo knew Marco was right. Every instinct screamed danger. This was manipulation, had to be manipulation. Someone had engineered this, planned it, sent this child as a Trojan horse into his fortress. But when he looked at Isabella's face, at the genuine happiness there, the uncomplicated trust, he couldn't find the deception. Sophia was crying silently, her hand pressed to her mouth, watching her daughter hold hands with the most dangerous man in the city. Isabella leaned forward, her balance precarious on the tall chair. Leonardo's free hand moved instinctively to steady her, catching her before she could tip. She looked up at him, smiled, and signed one more phrase. Protect. Together. The sign was crude, her motor control imperfect, but the meaning was crystalline. She wasn't asking him to protect her. She was offering to protect him. Or perhaps recognizing that they would protect each other. A partnership signed in silence between a mafia boss and a baby. Leonardo felt something crack inside him, a wall he'd built brick by brick after the bombing, after the silence, after realizing he would always be alone in crowds, isolated by the barrier of deafness. This child had walked through that wall like it didn't exist. He pulled his hand back slowly. Isabella let him go without protest, but her eyes followed his movement, attentive and aware. Leonardo stood. He gestured to Marco, "Take them back. Double the security on their quarters. You're still keeping them. Until I understand what this is." Leonardo's hands moved with finality. "No one touches them. No one questions them without my permission." Marco nodded, but his expression remained troubled. As Sophia lifted Isabella from the chair, the baby looked back at Leonardo over her mother's shoulder. She waved, a simple, childish gesture. Then signed, "Tomorrow." Not a question. A statement. A promise that she would see him again. Leonardo didn't respond. Couldn't respond. He watched them leave, the door closing with a soft click he couldn't hear but could feel in the change of air pressure. Marco approached, signing carefully. "What are you going to do?" Leonardo stared at his hand, the one Isabella had held. He could still feel the ghost of her warmth. "I don't know," he signed back. For the first time in a decade, Leonardo Russo had no plan. No strategy. No calculated next move. He had only questions. And a growing certainty that this child was going to change everything. The black sedan appeared at 11:23 a.m. Leonardo was in his office reviewing shipping manifests when Marco burst through the door, signing frantically. "Unknown vehicle at the east gate.
No appointment.
Driver won't identify himself." Leonardo was already moving. He grabbed his tablet, pulling up the security feed. The camera showed a sleek black car idling 20 feet from the gate. Tinted windows. No plates visible from this angle. License? Leonardo signed. Covered in mud. Deliberately. Marco's expression was grim. "They want us to know they're hiding their identity." Leonardo zoomed in on the driver's window. It lowered slowly, and a man's face appeared, mid-40s, scarred jaw, cold eyes. Leonardo recognized him immediately. Victor Castellano's driver. The Castellano family controlled the port district. They'd maintained an uneasy truce with Leonardo's organization for 3 years, neither side willing to risk open war. But Victor Castellano was ambitious. Hungry. And now his driver was at Leonardo's gate. What does he want? Marco signed. Leonardo typed on his tablet, sending a message to the gate guards. Search the vehicle. If clean, escort the driver to the south entrance. Alone. Marco's eyes widened. You're meeting with him. He came here for a reason. I need to know what it is. Could be a distraction. While we focus on him. Already thought of that. Leonardo typed another message. Full perimeter alert. Double guards on the servants' quarters. Marco understood immediately. You think they know about the child? Leonardo nodded once, his expression dark. The driver was clean, no weapons, no wires. Marco brought him to a windowless room in the south wing, designed specifically for conversations Leonardo wanted no one else to hear. The man sat with practiced ease, a slight smirk on his scarred face. He knew Leonardo was deaf, everyone knew. He pulled out a phone and typed slowly, turning the screen toward Leonardo. Mr. Castellano sends his regards. He's heard interesting rumors about your household. Leonardo's eyes narrowed. He took the phone and typed. What rumors? That you've taken in a guest. A woman and her child. That you've shown them unusual attention. The words sat on the screen like a threat. Leonardo's face remained impassive, but his mind raced. 3 days. The baby had been here 3 days, and already word had spread. That meant someone inside had talked. Or someone outside had been watching very carefully. He typed, Mr. Castellano is mistaken. I hire staff.
Nothing unusual about that.
The driver's smirk widened. He took the phone back. My employer doesn't make mistakes. He knows you never break your rules. No families. No children. Yet you broke it for this woman. That suggests she's valuable. Or her child is. Leonardo's jaw tightened. He typed one word. Leave. The driver didn't move. He typed again. Mr. Castellano wants you to know he respects boundaries. He's not interested in interfering with your personal affairs. But he's curious. And he wanted to make sure you know that others are curious too. What others? The Morellis asked about your new maid. The Kozlovs have been watching your gates. The driver leaned back, his message complete. Everyone wants to know what Leonardo Russo protects. Because whatever you protect is worth taking. The threat was clear. Crystal clear. Leonardo stood slowly. He took the phone one last time. Tell Mr. Castellano that my personal affairs remain personal. Anyone who forgets that will be reminded permanently. The driver read the message and laughed, a silent sound Leonardo saw but couldn't hear. He stood, gave a mocking half-bow, and walked toward the door where Marco waited. At the threshold, he turned back and pulled out his phone one more time. He typed something and held it up for Leonardo to see. Pretty baby. Dark eyes. Shame if something happened to her. Leonardo's hand was around the man's throat before Marco could react. He slammed the driver against the wall, his grip crushing, his face inches from the man's reddening face. Leonardo couldn't hear the choked gasps, the desperate wheezing, but he could feel the man's pulse hammering against his palm. Could feel the exact moment it started to weaken. Marco's hand landed on Leonardo's shoulder, squeezing hard. Leonardo glanced at him. Marco was signing urgently. Not yet. We need to know what they know. Leonardo's grip loosened fractionally. The driver sucked in air, his face purple, his eyes watering. Leonardo pulled him forward, then slammed him against the wall again.
Once. Twice.
Then released him. The driver collapsed to his knees, coughing violently. Leonardo typed on his own phone and shoved it in the man's face. You saw nothing. You know nothing. Go back to Castellano and tell him the next person who mentions my household doesn't go back at all. The driver nodded frantically, scrambling to his feet. Marco grabbed his arm and hauled him toward the exit. Leonardo watched them go, his hands trembling, not with fear, but with rage.
They knew about Isabella.
Somehow, impossibly, the predators had already caught the scent. Marco returned 10 minutes later, signing rapidly. He's gone. I put trackers on his car. 3 different ones. Good. Leonardo was already typing orders on his tablet. Move Sophia and Isabella.
Now.
Not the servants' quarters, somewhere secure. Where? Leonardo paused, thinking through the options. The mansion had safe rooms, reinforced chambers designed to withstand attacks. But those were defensive positions. Traps, essentially. He needed offense. The city's safe house he signed finally. The one on Morrison Street. Marco's eyebrows rose. That's your personal. I know what it is. If you put them there, you're claiming ownership. Everyone will know they're under your direct protection. They already know. Leonardo's hands moved sharply. Castellano didn't come here to ask questions. He came to see if I'd flinch. To measure my investment.
And did you?
Leonardo remembered Isabella's hand in his. Her sign, safe.
Protect.
Together. Yes, he signed. I did. Marco studied him for a long moment. You're making them a target. They already are, Leonardo said aloud, his voice rough from disuse. Now I'm making myself one too.
Marco nodded slowly.
I'll prepare the transport. 1 hour. Leonardo watched him leave, then turned to the window. Outside, the estate looked peaceful. Gardeners trimmed hedges. Guards patrolled in practiced rotations. Everything normal. But Leonardo had survived this long by seeing beneath surfaces. And beneath this calm was a gathering storm. The families were circling. They'd smelled vulnerability. The one thing Leonardo couldn't afford to show. And somehow, a 10-month-old baby had become the crack in his armor. He pulled out his phone and looked at the frozen security footage. Isabella reaching for his hand, her face bright with trust.
Protect.
Together. Leonardo's reflection stared back at him from the darkened screen. He'd built an empire on fear and isolation. Now he was about to risk it all for a child who spoke his language. The question was, why? And he was terrified of the answer. The safe house was in the oldest part of the city, hidden among crumbling brownstones and forgotten streets where police rarely patrolled. Leonardo owned the entire building under a shell corporation 3 layers deep. Sophia clutched Isabella tighter as Marco opened the apartment door. The space was sparse but secure, reinforced walls, bulletproof windows, one entrance with 3 separate locks. A cage dressed as a home. "You'll be safe here," Marco signed to Leonardo, who stood in the doorway.
4 guards outside.
2 on a roof. Rotation every 6 hours. Leonardo nodded, but his attention was on Sophia. She'd been silent during the entire drive, her face pale, her arms wrapped protectively around her daughter. Isabella, by contrast, seemed fascinated by everything. She watched Leonardo constantly, her dark eyes tracking his every movement. Marco left to check the perimeter. Sophia finally found her voice. "What's happening?" Her words came out strained. "Why are we here?" Leonardo pulled out his phone and typed, "You're in danger. Both of you. People know you're in my household." Sophia read the message, then looked up at him with disbelief. "We've been here 3 days. How could anyone?" Leonardo typed again. "My world moves fast. Word spreads. People watch." "What people?" "Dangerous people." "Because of what Isabella did?" Sophia's voice cracked. "Because she made some hand gestures? That's insane. She's a baby." Leonardo's jaw tightened. He typed, "In my world, anything unusual is valuable. Anything valuable becomes a target." Sophia sank onto the couch, still holding Isabella. "This is my fault. I should never have taken that job. I should have stayed in my cheap apartment, kept cleaning offices, stayed invisible." Isabella squirmed in her mother's arms, reaching toward Leonardo. Sophia held her tighter. "No, baby. No. He's not safe. None of this is safe." But Isabella persisted, making frustrated sounds, her hands moving. "Safe. Safe." Leonardo crouched slowly, bringing himself to eye level with the child. Isabella's face brightened immediately. She pushed against her mother's grip, wanting to be closer. Sophia's eyes filled with tears. "Why does she trust you? You're a criminal. You hurt people. She stopped, her voice breaking. "Why does my daughter see something in you that I can't?" Leonardo had no answer. He stood and typed, "Stay here. Don't leave. Don't contact anyone. I'll send supplies." "For how long?" "Until it's safe. And if it's never safe." Leonardo's fingers hovered over the phone screen. Then he typed something he'd never written to anyone. "Then I'll make it safe." The drive back to the mansion took 20 minutes. Marco sat in the passenger seat, signing periodically to update Leonardo on security measures. But Leonardo barely noticed. His mind was elsewhere, cataloging threats, analyzing vulnerabilities, calculating odds. 3 families knew about Isabella. Maybe more. In his world, information moved like wildfire. By tomorrow, every major player would have heard the rumors. Leonardo Russo, the untouchable, had shown weakness, had protected something, and predators always attacked weakness. His phone buzzed. A text from Marco's lieutenant. Movement at the south perimeter. Unidentified vehicle circling the block. Leonardo's hands moved. Description? Marco relayed the question through his phone. The response came quickly. Gray van.
No plats.
Tinted windows. Third pass in 10 minutes. Intercept, Leonardo signed. I want the driver alive. Marco made the call. They were still 5 minutes from the mansion when the next update arrived. Van fled. High speed. Lost them at the interstate. Leonardo slammed his fist against the car door. Marco didn't comment, just kept driving. They were testing him, probing his defenses, seeing how he'd react. When they reached the mansion, Leonardo went straight to his office. He pulled up the security network, every camera, every angle, every guard position displayed across multiple screens. Then he opened his private files. The ones even Marco didn't know about. He'd spent 10 years building leverage, documenting secrets, creating insurance policies against every major player in the city, photographs of infidelities, recordings of illegal deals, evidence of murders, embezzlement, betrayals. He'd never needed to use most of it. The threat of exposure was usually enough. But now he started drafting messages. To Victor Castellano, your driver touched my doorstep. Shall I send him back in pieces? Or would you prefer I share your offshore account records with the IRS? To the Morelli family, I hear your curiosity about my household. Perhaps I should be curious about your weapons shipments that never made it to their destinations. To Kozlov, your surveillance has been noted. Stop now, or your son's gambling debts become public knowledge. One by one, Leonardo typed threats backed by proof. He was leveraging everything he'd accumulated, burning bridges he'd carefully maintained. All for a woman and child he'd known for 3 days. Marco entered without knocking, his face grim. He signed, "You're declaring war." No, Leonardo signed back. "I'm preventing one." By threatening everyone at once? That's not prevention. That's provocation. They need to know the cost. Leonardo's hands moved sharply. They need to understand that touching what's mine means losing everything. And if they call your bluff. Leonardo's expression went cold. It's not a bluff. Marco stared at him for a long moment, then signed, "You care about them. The maid and her daughter. You actually care." Leonardo didn't respond. "In 8 years, I've never seen you care about anything except survival and power. Now a baby makes hand gestures and you're willing to burn your empire." "I'm protecting assets," Leonardo signed, but even as his hands moved, he knew it was a lie. Marco knew it too. She got to you. That child got through walls no one else could touch. Leonardo turned back to his screens, effectively ending the conversation. But Marco's words echoed in his mind. Isabella hadn't just gotten through his walls. She'd revealed that the walls were built to protect something he'd thought was long dead. His humanity. And now, because of her, he was about to find out if that humanity would save them or destroy them all. 2 floors below, in the servants' quarters, Mrs. Chen discovered something that would change everything. A phone, hidden in Sophia's old room. Still recording. Still transmitting. Someone had been listening from the very beginning. Leonardo stared at the phone in Mrs. Chen's trembling hand. It was cheap. Disposable. The kind bought with cash at convenience stores and discarded after a single use. But the recording app was professional grade, still running, a red, blinking in the corner of the cracked screen. How long? Leonardo signed to Marco. Marco examined the device. Batteries nearly dead. Based on the charge level, at least 48 hours. Maybe more. Someone had planted it before Sophia and Isabella ever entered his dining hall. Before the baby made that first sign. Before any of this began. Which meant this wasn't an accident. Leonardo's mind raced through possibilities. Sophia was the obvious answer, a planted spy, a perfectly crafted infiltration. But he'd had her background checked 3 times. Former office cleaner. No criminal record.
No unusual connections.
No red flags. Too clean, perhaps. Bring me everything Leonardo signed. Every record. Every document. Birth certificates, employment history, medical files. I want to know every place she's been. Every person she's met. Marco nodded and left quickly. Mrs. Chen remained, her face pale. "Sir, should I?" Leonardo held up his hand. He typed on his phone. "Did you see anyone enter that room? Anyone at all?" Mrs. Chen shook her head. "Only Sophia and cleaning staff. I supervise the schedules myself." "Who cleaned that room?" "Maria and Elena. They've been with us for years. Both loyal." Leonardo's eyes narrowed. Loyalty was a word people used before betrayal. He typed, "Check their bank accounts. Look for unusual deposits. Do it quietly." Mrs. Chen nodded and hurried out. Alone, Leonardo examined the phone more closely.
No contacts.
No call history. Just the recording app, still transmitting to an encrypted server somewhere. Whoever planted this was careful. Professional. But they'd made one mistake. They'd left it running after it served its purpose. That meant either they wanted him to find it, a message, a taunt, or they'd lost track of it in the chaos of moving Sofia and Isabella. Leonardo pulled out his own phone and called his tech specialist. Within minutes, he had an answer. The phone's signal was bouncing through 17 proxy servers across 4 continents. Untraceable. Leonardo set down the device and walked to his private files. The ones he'd been avoiding. His own medical records. He hadn't looked at them in years. Hadn't wanted to. The bombing that stole his hearing had stolen more than that. It had fractured his identity, turned him from a man who led through words into something else entirely. But Dr. Chen's evaluation of Isabella had mentioned something. Something about enhanced visual processing. Compensatory development. Leonardo opened the file from 8 years ago. Post-bombing neurological assessment. He skipped past the hearing loss diagnosis. He knew that part by heart. Instead, he focused on the sections he'd never read carefully before. Patient exhibits significant neurological reorganization following trauma. Auditory cortex showing reduced activity, but compensatory increases observed in visual and somatosensory regions. Enhanced sensitivity to peripheral movement, facial microexpressions, and spatial awareness documented. This reorganization suggests the brain is rerouting resources to remaining sensory inputs. Leonardo's eyes moved faster. Patient demonstrates exceptional ability to read nonverbal communication, body language, breathing patterns, minute muscle movements. Testing indicates visual processing speed approximately 40% above baseline norms. Recommend continued monitoring for further adaptive changes. He'd never continued monitoring. He'd learned sign language, built new communication systems, and moved on. The adaptation had felt natural, instinctive. But according to this, it wasn't natural at all. It was his brain rewiring itself, becoming hypersensitive to visual information to compensate for the loss of sound. Leonardo sat back slowly. If his deafness had enhanced his ability to read people, to see patterns invisible to others, could Isabella have something similar? Not deafness, but something else that made her hyper-attuned to visual communication. Dr. Chun had said she wasn't deaf. Her hearing was perfect. But what if she had something else? Some neurological difference that made her brain process visual information the same way Leonardo's did. He pulled out his phone and texted Dr. Chun, "Need complete neurological scan on the child. MRI, EEG, full workup. I don't care about cost or discretion anymore. I need answers." The response came quickly. Understood. When? Tomorrow morning. The safe house has a medical room. Set it up there. This will require specialized equipment. Then bring it. Leonardo set down his phone and returned to his own medical files. He read deeper, looking for anything that might explain the connection he felt with Isabella. And there, buried in a footnote on page 17, he found it. Patient reports feeling recognized by certain individuals who communicate primarily through visual means. This may represent a form of neurological kinship, individuals with similar processing patterns unconsciously identifying each other through microbehaviors and attention patterns. Neurological kinship. Leonardo's chest tightened. Isabella hadn't learned his signs. She hadn't been trained to recognize him. She'd simply seen someone whose brain worked like hers. Someone who existed in the same silent, hypervisual world. She'd recognized him because they were the same. Marco returned with an armful of files. He set them on Leonardo's desk and signed, "Everything on Sofia Martinez. But there's a problem." What problem? Her employment history has gaps. 3 months, 2 years ago. No records.
No documentación.
She told us she was caring for sick family, but what? Marco pulled out a single sheet of paper. A hospital record from a clinic in Nevada. She was pregnant. High-risk pregnancy. Hospitalized for 2 months at a private neurological research facility. Leonardo's blood went cold. Neurological research. They specialize in fetal brain development. Experimental treatments for genetic disorders. Marco's face was grim. The clinic is funded by several pharmaceutical companies. but buried in the paperwork. One investor stands out. He pulled out another document. A name Leonardo recognized immediately.
Víctor Castellano.
The same Victor Castellano whose driver had threatened Isabella yesterday. The same Victor Castellano who'd sent men to circle the safe house. Leonardo's hands moved slowly. He knew about Isabella before she was born.
Marco Nadid.
The question is, did he create her, or is he trying to steal her? Leonardo stood, his mind assembling pieces of a puzzle he hadn't known existed. A pregnant woman sent to a specialized facility. A baby born with exceptional neurological development. A bugged phone. A carefully orchestrated introduction. Sophia had walked into his mansion 3 days ago, but this had started 2 years earlier. Isabella wasn't a coincidence.
She was a project.
And Leonardo had no idea if Sophia was a victim or an architect. His phone buzzed. A text from the security team at the safe house. Motion detected on the roof. 2 targets.
Armed.
Leonardo's world narrowed to a single point of absolute clarity. They were coming for Isabella. And he was 5 miles away. He grabbed his jacket and ran. Leonardo's car hit 90 on the empty industrial roads. Marco drove, his jaw set, one hand on the wheel and the other on his phone coordinating with the safe house guards. Leonardo watched the security feed on his tablet, grainy night vision footage of the safe house roof. 2 figures moved with tactical precision. Black clothing. Suppressed weapons. They weren't amateurs. Guards responding, Marco signed one-handed while driving. ETA 2 minutes before we arrive. Too long. Leonardo's mind calculated distances, angles, vulnerabilities. The safe house had good defenses, but it was designed for siege situations, holding out until reinforcements arrived. Not for preventing entry by professionals who'd already breached the roof. The tablet showed the figures attaching something to the roof access door. Breaching charge. Small, controlled. They'd blow the lock and be inside in seconds. Leonardo typed rapidly on his phone, sending orders. Don't engage on the roof. Fall back to the apartment. Fortify the door. Nothing gets through. The response came, understood. Then another message from a different guard. Sir, we have a problem. Leonardo's jaw clenched. What problem? The woman. She won't let us lock her in. She's demanding to know what's happening. Of course she was. Sophia wasn't stupid. She'd hear the guards mobilizing, see the weapons drawn. She'd know something was wrong. Tell her the truth, Leonardo typed. Men are coming. Stay down. Protect the child. Marco glanced at him, eyebrows raised, but said nothing. The car screeched around a corner. 3 more blocks. On the tablet, the roof access door exploded inward. The 2 figures disappeared into the stairwell. Leonardo's guards were already in position. 2 inside the apartment with Sophia and Isabella, 2 in the hallway creating a choke point. Good defensive positions. But the attackers weren't going for the apartment. They bypassed the 3rd floor entirely, continuing down to the 2nd level. Leonardo watched in confusion as they moved to apartment 2B, directly below the safe house. What are they doing? Marco signed. Leonardo zoomed in on the feed. The figures were placing charges again.
Not on a door this time.
On the floor. Understanding hit Leonardo like ice water. They weren't trying to breach the apartment defenses. They were going through the floor. Get everyone out. Leonardo typed frantically.
Now.
But it was too late. The explosion punched through the ceiling of apartment 2B and the floor of the safe house simultaneously. The tablet screen went white, then black. Security feed lost. Marco slammed the brakes in front of the building. Leonardo was out before the car fully stopped, racing toward the entrance. Smoke billowed from the 3rd floor windows. Leonardo's ears told him nothing. No screams, no gunfire, no alarms, but he could feel the vibrations through the ground. Secondary explosions. Electrical fires. He took the stairs 3 at a time, Marco right behind him. The 3rd floor hallway was chaos. Smoke, debris, sparking wires hanging from the damaged ceiling. The safe house door hung off its hinges. Leonardo's vision tunneled. He moved through the smoke with predatory focus, his hand finding the gun at his back. Inside, the apartment was destroyed. The explosion had torn a hole in the living room floor, revealing the apartment below. Furniture overturned, walls cracked, and blood. A trail of it leading toward the bedroom. Leonardo followed it, his weapon raised. Behind him, Marco cleared corners with military efficiency. The bedroom door was closed. Leonardo tested the handle, locked from inside. He slammed his shoulder against it.
Once. Twice.
The lock gave way. Sophia was pressed against the far wall, clutching Isabella. Her arm was bleeding, a piece of shrapnel embedded in her shoulder. Tears streamed down her face. But Isabella was unharmed. And between them and the door stood one of Leonardo's guards, the younger one, Miguel. His gun was pointed at Sophia and the baby. Miguel's eyes widened when he saw Leonardo. His mouth moved. "Sir, I can explain." Leonardo didn't hesitate. He fired once. Miguel dropped, the gun falling from his lifeless hand. Marco swore behind him, signing rapidly. It was Miguel? He was the leak. Leonardo moved to Sophia, checking her wound. It was deep but not life-threatening. Isabella was crying, terrified but physically fine. Sophia grabbed Leonardo's jacket with her good hand, her words tumbling out. They came through the floor. "Miguel, he locked us in here. He was waiting for them." He was going to. Her voice broke. Leonardo gently removed her hand and turned to Marco. "Get medical.
Now."
And find the other attackers." Marco nodded and disappeared into the smoke. Sophia was still talking, her voice rising with hysteria. "I didn't know. I swear I didn't know. The phone, someone must have planted it. The clinic, they said it was just treatment for complications. They said Isabella would be healthy. They never told me." Leonardo held up his hand. "Stop." He pulled out his phone and typed, "I know you didn't plant the phone, but you need to tell me everything about that clinic. Everything about Isabella's birth. No more secrets." Sophia read the message, her face crumbling. She nodded. Then Isabella did something that made Leonardo's chest constrict. She reached out and touched his face. Her tiny hand pressed against his cheek, and she signed with her other hand, "Safe.
Protect."
But there was something new in her expression. Not just trust. Understanding. She knew what he'd done. Knew he'd killed to protect her. And instead of fear, she showed gratitude. A baby shouldn't understand violence. Shouldn't comprehend death. But Isabella did. Leonardo pulled back, disturbed. What exactly had been done to this child? Marco returned with a first aid kit. The attackers escaped. Set charges in the stairwell to cover their retreat. Professional extraction. And our other guards. One dead. One injured. The explosion killed Johnson. Martinez has a concussion, but he'll live. Leonardo's hands tightened into fists. One traitor. One successful infiltration. 2 casualties. And they'd still almost lost Isabella. He looked at Miguel's body, then at the hole blown in the floor. This wasn't a random attack. It was coordinated. Planned down to the minute. Someone had known exactly where Isabella would be. Had placed a traitor inside Leonardo's inner circle. Had engineered everything perfectly. And they'd still failed, but only barely. Which meant they'd try again. Leonardo made a decision. He typed on his phone and showed it to Marco. "We're leaving the city. Tonight. All of us." "Where?" Leonardo paused, then typed a location he'd hoped never to use. His final contingency. The place he'd prepared for the day everything fell apart. The coast. The private property. "No one knows about it except you and me." Marco's eyes widened. "That's your escape plan. If you use it, you can never come back to this life." Leonardo looked at Isabella, still clutched in her mother's arms. Still signing safe with unwavering trust. He typed, "I know." This child had walked into his life 3 days ago. And now, because of her, he was walking away from everything he'd built. The empire. The power. The control. All of it. For a baby who spoke his language in a world of silence. Marco stared at him for a long moment, then nodded. I'll arrange transport. 1 hour. Leonardo turned back to Sofia. Her eyes met his, filled with terror and confusion and desperate hope. He typed one more message, "Trust me." She read it, then looked at her daughter, at Isabella, who was signing protect over and over, as if she knew what was coming. "I don't have a choice, do I?" Sofia whispered. Leonardo didn't need to answer. They both knew the truth. The moment Isabella had recognized him, their fates had become intertwined. Now they would survive together. Or die together. The coastal house appeared through morning fog like a ghost. It sat alone on a cliff overlooking the Pacific, miles from the nearest town.
No neighbors. No witnesses.
Just wind, waves, and isolation. Leonardo had bought it 6 years ago under a name that didn't exist, through a company that couldn't be traced. It was his final card. The place he'd run if everything collapsed. He'd never imagined bringing anyone here. Marco pulled a car up to the weathered gate. The property looked abandoned, exactly as intended. Overgrown grass, peeling paint, broken shutters. But beneath the decay was steel, reinforced walls, bulletproof windows, a safe room that could survive anything short of a missile strike. Sofia stirred in the back seat, Isabella asleep in her arms. She'd been silent for the entire 4-hour drive, her wounded shoulder bandaged, her eyes hollow with shock. Leonardo opened her door. She flinched, then caught herself, shame crossing her face. He typed on his phone, "You're safe now." Inside. She looked at the dilapidated house, doubt clear in her expression. But she climbed out, cradling Isabella carefully. Marco moved ahead, checking the perimeter while Leonardo unlocked the front door. The interior was sparse but functional, furniture under dust covers, kitchen stocked with non-perishables, generator humming in the basement. A cage built for one that now held 3. Sofia sank onto the covered couch, exhaustion overwhelming her adrenaline. Isabella woke, blinking in the gray morning light filtering through dirty windows. Her eyes found Leonardo immediately. She smiled. After everything, the explosion, the blood, the chaos, this child smiled at him like he was safety incarnate. Leonardo felt something twist in his chest. Marco appeared from clearing the rooms, signing, "Secure. No signs of tampering. We're alone. Set up surveillance on the access road. If anyone comes within 5 miles, I want to know." "Already done."
Marco hesitated.
"What now?" Leonardo looked at Sofia, at Isabella, at the bare room that would be their prison and sanctuary. "Now we wait," he signed. "And we get answers." An hour later, Sofia sat at the kitchen table while Leonardo treated her shoulder properly. His hands were surprisingly gentle, though his face remained impassive. Isabella played on a blanket nearby, watched by Marco. She was arranging small blocks, knocking them down, rebuilding. Normal baby behavior. Except she kept signing.
Build. Break. Build.
Over and over, with perfect form. Marco's eyes kept drifting to her, his expression troubled. Sofia winced as Leonardo applied antiseptic. "I need to tell you everything," she said quietly. "About the clinic. About Isabella. About what they did." Leonardo pulled out his phone, ready to type, but Sofia shook her head. "I know you can't hear me,
but I need to say it anyway.
I need someone to know." Her voice cracked. "Even if that someone is you." Leonardo waited, his hands still. 2 years ago, I was pregnant and alone. The father left when he found out. I had no money, no insurance, barely enough for rent. Sofia's eyes fixed on Isabella. Then I started having complications. Bleeding.
Pain.
The clinic doctors said I'd lose the baby unless I got specialized treatment.
She paused, swallowing hard.
A man approached me at the hospital. Said he represented a research foundation. They'd pay for everything, all treatments, all costs, if I agreed to participate in a study. Prenatal neurological development, he said. Cutting-edge treatments that would ensure my baby was healthy. Leonardo's jaw tightened. He knew where this was going. I was desperate. I said yes, tears spilled down Sofia's cheeks. They moved me to that facility in Nevada. Gave me injections, medications, ran tests constantly. They said it was all standard, all safe. She looked up at Leonardo, her eyes pleading for understanding. But Isabella wasn't normal when she was born. She watched everything, tracked movements before babies should even focus. The doctors said it was good advanced development, they called it. A success. Sophia's voice dropped to a whisper. I didn't know they'd made her into something else. Something that would attract people like you. Like those men who tried to take her. Leonardo typed slowly. What exactly did they do to her? I don't know. They never told me specifics. Just that they were optimizing neural pathway development during critical growth phases. Sophia wiped her eyes. I stole her medical file when we left. It's mostly technical jargon I don't understand. But one phrase kept appearing. Enhanced visual cortex integration. Leonardo went very still. The same terminology from his own medical records. The same neurological reorganization that had happened to him after the bombing. They'd done to Isabella intentionally what trauma had done to him accidentally. They'd rewired her brain to process the world through enhanced visual awareness. Made her hypersensitive to patterns, movements, nonverbal communication. They'd made her see the world the way he did. He typed the file. Where is it? Hidden in Isabella's diaper bag. I didn't know who to trust, so I kept it close. Sophia's hands shook. Are they going to keep coming? Are they going to take her? Leonardo didn't answer. He stood and walked to where Isabella played. She looked up at him, her dark eyes unnaturally focused for a 10-month-old. She set down her blocks and raised her hands. Alone. Together. The same sign from days ago. The recognition of kinship. But now Leonardo understood what she was really saying. She wasn't just recognizing similarity. She was stating fact. They were both products of neurological rewiring, his by accident, hers by design. Both forced to navigate a world that moved differently for them than for everyone else. Both alone in crowds. Both isolated by the very enhancement that made them exceptional. Leonardo crouched down slowly. Isabella crawled toward him without hesitation, closing the distance between them. She placed her small hand flat against his chest, over his heart, then moved it outward. Safe. But she didn't stop there. Her other hand rose, forming another sign. One Leonardo had never taught anyone, never shared, barely admitted to himself. Home. His breath caught. This child, created in a laboratory, modified before birth, weaponized by design, she had somehow found the one word that defined what Leonardo had lost 8 years ago. Home. Not a place. Not safety or security. But belonging. The feeling of being understood without explanation. Of being seen without judgment. Of existing in a space where silence wasn't isolation but connection. Leonardo's hand moved before he could stop it. He signed back. Home. Isabella's face lit up with joy so pure it hurt to witness. She clapped once, then launched herself forward, tiny arms wrapping around his neck. Leonardo caught her instinctively, this small body trusting him completely. Her warmth against his chest. Her heartbeat rapid but steady. And for the first time in 8 years, Leonardo Russo felt something other than the cold calculation of survival. He felt peace. Marco was signing something, his expression concerned, but Leonardo couldn't look away from Isabella. She pulled back, holding his face between her small hands, studying him with that unsettling intensity. Then she signed one more phrase. Protect. Together. Always. Not a request. Not a hope. A vow. This child, barely able to walk, was promising to protect him just as he'd promised to protect her. Sophia was crying openly now, watching them. She's never done that with anyone.
Never trusted like that. Not even with me sometimes. Leonardo understood why.
Sophia loved Isabella, but she didn't speak Isabella's language. Didn't see the world through the same enhanced visual lens. But Leonardo did. He stood, still holding Isabella, and turned to face the window. Outside, waves crashed against cliffs. Fog rolled across empty landscape. No empire here. No power. No control. Just survival. Connection. And something that felt dangerously close to family. Marco approached, signing carefully. They'll find us eventually. Castellano won't stop. We need a plan. Leonardo looked down at Isabella, who was signing safe against his shoulder, content and unafraid. He'd built an empire on fear, on making others afraid to touch what was his. But maybe fear wasn't enough anymore. Maybe it was time for something permanent. He shifted Isabella to one arm and signed with the other. Call them all. Every family. Every rival. I'm making one final offer. What offer? Leonardo's expression hardened into something absolute. Everything. They can have everything. Territory, operations, assets. All of it. Marco's eyes widened. In exchange for what? Leonardo looked at Isabella, then at Sofia, then back at Marco. Their word. Guaranteed safety. For these two. Forever. They'll never agree. They will. Leonardo signed, his movements sharp with certainty. Because I'm the only one who knows where all the bodies are buried. Literally. And if anything happens to this child, every secret I've kept for a decade gets released. Marco stared at him. You'd burn it all. Everything you built. Leonardo nodded once. Because Isabella had shown him something he'd forgotten. Empire meant nothing compared to home. The abandoned church stood like a broken tooth against the gray sky. Leonardo had chosen the location carefully, neutral ground, a place belonging to no family, claimed by no territory. Just old stone walls, shattered stained glass, and the weight of forgotten prayers. 5 families. 5 representatives. All seated in the rotting pews, watching him with varying degrees of curiosity, suspicion, and hunger. Victor Castellano sat in front, his scarred face impassive. Beside him, Elena Morelli, cold eyes calculating. Behind them, representatives from the Kozlov, Chun, and DeLuca families. Everyone who mattered. Everyone who'd been circling. Marco stood at Leonardo's shoulder, signing the arrivals. All here. All armed. 20 guards total outside. Leonardo nodded. He'd expected nothing less. He stepped forward into what had once been the altar space, his footsteps echoing in the hollow chamber. Every eye tracked him, waiting. Leonardo pulled out his tablet and typed, his words displaying on a portable screen Marco had set up. I'm here to end this. All of it. Victor Castellano leaned forward. And what, exactly? Your secrecy about the child? Your threats against our operations? Or your entire empire? Leonardo typed. All of it. Silence fell. Even the wind outside seemed to quiet. Elena Morelli spoke next, her voice sharp. You called this meeting. You demanded our presence. And now you offer surrender? What game is this? Leonardo's fingers moved across the screen. No game. I'm offering you everything. My territory in the Port District, yours, Victor. My distribution network, yours, Elena. Shipping routes to the Kozlovs. Financial operations to the Chens. Legitimate businesses to the DeLucas. The representatives exchanged glances. Victor's eyes narrowed. In exchange for what? He asked, though Leonardo could see he already knew. Guaranteed safety. For Sofia Martinez and her daughter Isabella. Complete immunity. No retaliation, no pursuit, no interest. Ever. Victor laughed, a harsh, disbelieving sound. You'd give up a 10-year empire for a maid and her baby? What makes them so valuable? Leonardo paused, then typed. That's not your concern. It absolutely is our concern, Elena snapped. You don't walk away from this life because of sentiment. That child has value. Special abilities. We've all heard the rumors. We all know what Castellano's clinic created. Leonardo's hands stilled. He turned slowly to Victor. Victor's expression didn't change, but something flickered in his eyes. Confirmation. Leonardo typed. You funded her creation. I funded research, Victor said carefully. Neurological enhancement. The potential for creating individuals with exceptional visual processing, pattern recognition, tactical awareness. Useful traits. You experimented on pregnant women. I invested in medical advancement. What the doctors did was their choice. Victor leaned back. But yes, Isabella was the success story, the proof of concept. And her mother stole her before we could complete the program. Sophia. Leonardo's jaw clenched. She hadn't just fled complications. She'd escaped. Elena spoke up. If Castellano created her, he is claim. You can't negotiate away his property. She's not property, Leonardo typed, his fingers striking the keys hard enough to crack one. She's a child. She's an asset, Victor corrected. One I've invested considerably in. And one I intend to reclaim, he stood. Your offer is interesting, Russo. But incomplete. You want us to walk away from something valuable. What prevents us from simply taking everything, your territory and the child? Leonardo had expected this. He pulled out his phone and sent a command. Every representative's phone buzzed simultaneously. They looked down at screens displaying files, photographs, documents, recordings. Years of accumulated leverage. Victor's offshore accounts. Elena's arrangement with federal prosecutors. Kozlov's weapons trafficking routes. Chen's money laundering operations. DeLuca's connection to 3 unsolved murders. Everything Leonardo had collected. Everything he'd kept secret. He typed, insurance. If anything happens to Sophia or Isabella, any accident, any incident, any mysterious disappearance, these files go public. To law enforcement, to rivals, to media. Everything. You destroy yourself too, Elena said, but her voice had lost its edge. I'm already destroyed, Leonardo typed. I have nothing left to lose. But you do. All of you do. Victor's face had gone white. You're bluffing. You'd never release this. It would collapse the entire network. Dozens of families would fall. Exactly. Leonardo's eyes were cold.
Mutually assured destruction.
The only guarantee that works in our world. Marcos signed urgently. This is insane. You're making permanent enemies. Leonardo ignored him. He typed, I'm leaving this life. Taking them somewhere you'll never find. You get everything I built. You get peace. You get to avoid exposure. All you have to do is nothing. Never look for them. Never pursue them. Never touch them. The church fell silent except for the drip of water through the broken roof. Victor stood slowly, his hands clenched. You're willing to burn everything for a child you've known for days. Leonardo didn't need to type an answer. His expression said it all.
Because yes.
Yes, he was. Isabella had done what no enemy could. She'd shown him there was something more important than power. More permanent than control. Connection. Understanding. Home. Victor looked at the others. Some silent conversation passed between them. Years of alliances, rivalries, calculations. Finally, Victor turned back to Leonardo. You're asking for an oath. In our world, that means something. Leonardo nodded. And if we refuse? If we decide the child is worth more than your secrets? Leonardo typed one word. War. Not a threat. A promise. He'd burn the entire criminal network to ash before letting them touch Isabella. Victor must have seen it in his eyes, the absolute certainty. The willingness to destroy everything. You've changed, Victor said quietly. The Leonardo Russo I knew would never sacrifice power for sentiment. Leonardo typed. That Leonardo Russo died 3 days ago. Another long silence. Then, impossibly, Victor extended his hand. You have my word. The child and her mother are untouchable. Any violation means your files go public, and we all fall. Mutually assured destruction, as you said. One by one, the others stood.
Elena.
Kozlov's man. Chen's representative. DeLuca's lieutenant. One by one, they gave their word.
Not because they wanted to,
but because Leonardo had made it cost more to refuse than to accept. Marco's hands moved in disbelief. They agreed. They actually agreed. Leonardo didn't feel victorious. He felt empty. He just traded an empire for 2 lives. And somehow, it felt like the first intelligent decision he'd made in a decade. As the families filed out, Victor paused at the door. You'll disappear? Leonardo nodded. And if the child becomes a problem later? If she draws attention, creates exposure? Leonardo's eyes hardened. He typed one final message. Then you'll remember why you feared me. Victor held his gaze, then smiled, a cold, humorless expression. Worth it. She was always meant to be extraordinary. He left. Marco approached, signing slowly. It's done. You're really walking away.
Yes.
To what? To playing father to someone else's child. Leonardo looked at his hands, scarred, weapon-worn, stained with years of violence. Then he thought of Isabella's small hand in his. Her sign, home. He signed back to Marco. To something better. 3 months later, the countryside house looked different. The overgrown garden had been tamed into neat rows of vegetables. Fresh paint covered the weathered walls. New curtains hung in windows that had been replaced, cleaned, opened to let in light. It looked like a home. Leonardo stood at the kitchen counter, chopping vegetables for dinner. The knife moved with the same precision he'd once used for darker purposes, but now it was for something simple. Something normal. Sophia entered, carrying a basket of laundry. She'd filled out in the past months, the hollow fear in her cheeks replaced with color, with health. Her shoulder had healed, leaving only a faint scar. She paused, watching him cook. You don't have to do this, you know. I can. Leonardo held up his hand gently. He pulled out his phone. I want to. Besides, you did the morning work. They'd fallen into routines. Shared responsibilities. A life built on cooperation rather than hierarchy. It was strange. Uncomfortable sometimes. But it was real. Sophia smiled, something she did more often now. Isabella's almost asleep. She kept signing outside, over and over. I think she wants to play in the garden tomorrow. Leonardo nodded, returning to his cutting. Through the window, he could see the ocean in the distance, waves catching the golden light of late afternoon.
No guards. No cameras.
No security feeds. Marco checked in weekly, reporting that the families had kept their word. No movement.
No surveillance.
The files remained sealed, the threat still potent. Leonardo had vanished from his old world completely, and discovered he didn't miss it. Footsteps, small, unsteady, approached from the hallway. Leonardo turned. Isabella stood in the doorway, rubbing her eyes. She'd grown in 3 months.
Could walk steadily now.
Could pick up objects with increasing dexterity. And her signing had become extraordinary. She saw Leonardo and her face lit up. She toddled forward, arms outstretched. Leonardo wiped his hands and crouched, catching her as she reached him. She wrapped her arms around his neck, her favorite greeting, then pulled back to sign. Hungry.
Eat. Family.
That last word, family, was new. She'd started using it 2 weeks ago. Not for Sophia alone, but for the 3 of them together. Leonardo's chest tightened the way it always did when she signed it. He nodded and signed back. Soon. Dinner almost ready. Isabella clapped, then signed. Help. She wanted to help cook. Leonardo glanced at Sophia, who shrugged with an amused smile. He lifted Isabella to sit on the counter beside the cutting board, carefully positioning her away from the knife. He handed her a wooden spoon and an empty bowl. She stirred nothing with intense concentration, mimicking his movements. Her tongue poked out slightly, her focused face. Sophia laughed softly. She copies everything you do, walks like you, sits like you, even frowns like you when she's thinking. Leonardo hadn't noticed. But watching Isabella now, he saw it. The way she held herself with careful stillness, the way her eyes tracked everything around her with hyper-aware attention. She'd bonded to him completely. Imprinted almost. Sophia moved closer, her voice gentle. I know you didn't ask for this. For us. For any of it. Leonardo set down his knife and pulled out his phone. Neither did you. No, Sophia agreed. But I'm grateful it happened. That we ended up here. With you, she paused. I know what you were. What you did. The things you're trying to forget. Leonardo's jaw tightened. He'd never discussed his past with her in detail. Never explained the empire he'd abandoned. I don't care about that, Sophia continued. I care about who you are now. Who you're choosing to be. She gestured to Isabella, happily stirring her empty bowl. She sees something in you. Something good. And I'm starting to see it too. Leonardo didn't know how to respond. He'd spent a decade building walls, and these two had dismantled them in weeks. Isabella tugged his sleeve, demanding attention. She signed, "Story?" After dinner. It was their routine now. After dinner, Leonardo would sit with Isabella and teach her new signs. Not his tactical language, he'd stopped using those, but real ASL. Beautiful, expressive, complete. He was teaching her to communicate with the world, not just with him.
Yes, he signed.
Story after dinner. Isabella beamed and returned to her stirring with renewed vigor.
Dinner was simple.
Roasted chicken, vegetables, bread Sophia had baked that morning. They ate at a small table. Nothing like the massive dining hall where this had all begun. Isabella sat in her high chair between them, signing constantly, asking questions, making observations. Her vocabulary grew daily. Bird outside, she signed, pointing at the window. Sky blue, she added. Tomorrow play. Leonardo answered each sign patiently. Sophia watched them, this conversation in silence, and smiled. After dinner, Leonardo carried Isabella to the living room. She was getting heavier, growing so fast. He settled into the worn armchair, and she curled against his chest, her favorite position for story time. He began signing a story, one he'd learned as a child, before the bombing, before the silence. A fairy tale about a king who'd lost his voice and learned to speak through actions instead of words. Isabella watched his hands with rapt attention, occasionally signing questions. King sad.
Yes.
At first, but then happy.
Yes. He found new ways to speak.
New people who understood him. Isabella nodded seriously, as if this made perfect sense. Then she placed her hand over Leonardo's heart, the way she often did.
Safe, she signed.
Leonardo's hands stilled. 3 months, and she still signed that word to him daily. A constant affirmation. But this time, she added something new. Home. Always.
Not just home now.
But always. Forever. Leonardo felt the wall inside him, the last one still standing, finally crumble. He signed back. Yes. Always. Isabella smiled and nestled closer. Within minutes, her breathing deepened. Sleep. Sophia appeared in the doorway, watching them. She loves you, she whispered. Completely. Leonardo looked down at the sleeping child in his arms. This tiny person who'd been engineered in a laboratory, who'd recognized him across impossible distance, who'd cost him everything and given him more. He pulled out his phone with his free hand and typed, "I love her too." The words felt foreign. Dangerous.
Real.
Sophia's eyes glistened. What happens when she grows up? When she asks about what you were, what you did? Leonardo considered this. Then typed, "I'll tell her the truth. That I was lost. And she found me. And if she asks why you gave up everything for her." Leonardo looked at Isabella's peaceful face, her small hand still resting against his chest. He typed slowly. "Because some things are more valuable than empires. Some connections are worth more than power. And some promises, even silent ones, are forever." Sophia wiped her eyes and moved to sit beside them. She rested her head on Leonardo's shoulder, a gesture that had become natural over the weeks. 3 people who'd found each other through impossible circumstances. 3 people who'd been alone in different ways. Now a family. Outside, the sun set over the ocean, painting the sky in shades of gold and purple. Inside, in a small house far from the world Leonardo had ruled, silence wasn't isolation anymore. It was peace. Isabella stirred in her sleep, her hand moving in an unconscious sign. Safe.
Protect.
Home. Leonardo's hand covered hers gently, his own silent promise repeating in his mind. Always. Together. Forever. The Mafia boss who dined alone had found something no empire could give him. He'd found belonging. And in the language of silence they shared, that was everything.